Hello there, and welcome. So this video is going to be the first in a series, helping you on your way through the Darkest Dungeon. The Darkest Dungeon is a pretty horrific game. It definitely can hurt you at times in ways you never thought humanly possible. And there's a lot of information in Darkest Dungeon. It's definitely a game that even through your second and third playthrough, you can still be learning things all the time. So I figured I'd make a series of videos, starting with this one, that can hopefully, if you're just picking it up or a beginner in it in general, might actually help you kind of figure things out with a little bit less stress than when I went through it the first 2 or 3 times. So this video is going to be covering the estate. When you start the game out, you're going to be going through pretty much from a carriage that crashed with your 2 main characters, and you're going to have to fight your way to the estate. Now, that fight is fairly simplistic, and it's 2 characters that do a lot of close combat / range damage. You kind of just do some attacks, you'll take down some enemies, and you'll be able to get to the estate. It should be fairly painless, one can hope. But we'll get to combat in another video. So the estate itself is kind of just looks like a dreary-ass town with like a castle in the background. It looks pretty horrific, pretty Transylvanian, to say the least. And there are multiple buildings in here that you're going to be interacting with throughout the game. And if you don't know what each of these buildings does in the beginning, it can cause you a lot of grief and waste a lot of your time and make you very, very frustrated. So I figured we would go through what each of these buildings does and probably when you should start interacting with them. And we're going to go through right here. So we're going to have, going down the list, we're going to have the stagecoach, the tavern, the sanitarium, the abbey, the guild, the blacksmith, the nomad wagon, and the survivalist. Now there's one other one there that's the, I believe it's called the memoirs, but it doesn't really matter. It's just a few cutscenes, so we're not going to worry about that one that much. But we'll go into detail what each of these does, what their upgrades do, and really just kind of figure out when you want to start interacting with them and why. I'll go over these so that you can fully understand them, and hopefully it'll save you a lot of grief in the beginning of this game and middle of this game. The end, you kind of can work out the way that you want to play it, but these beginning steps can help you a great deal along the way. Alright, so the first building that you're going to be looking at, and it's going to be pretty much the first one you're going to interact with in the estate, is going to be the stagecoach, which is going to be used throughout the game. Now, every single week, which passes pretty much every single time you go through one dungeon, a new week starts, there are going to be new recruits that are going to show up in the stagecoach that you can purchase for free. It's awesome. All kinds of different characters. It's randomized. You'll get there. But basically, you're going to start using these people from the stagecoach to fill out your roster and start kind of nitpicking heroes and teams that you want. Now, you can upgrade almost all of the buildings in this game. And I play on PlayStation 4, so you're going to want to hold down the L2 button on your controller, and it'll bring up pretty much the upgrade menus for all these buildings, so keep that in mind as I'm talking. So the upgrades for the stagecoach are the Stagecoach Network, the Hero Barracks, and the Experienced Recruits. Now, the Stagecoach Network is going to increase the number of available heroes. The Hero Barracks is going to increase your roster size of number of heroes that you can have in your roster, and the Experienced Recruits is going to start giving you higher experienced recruits. So they start at like level 2 or 3 instead of 0. Now, I want you to take the Experienced Recruits upgrade and throw that shit out your head for the beginning of the game. Don't worry about it. What you do want to do as early in the game as you can is start upgrading the Stagecoach Network and the Hero Barracks. So basically it's going to give you a higher roster and a higher amount of choices for how you can kind of deck out the roster that you want. You're going to want to do that as soon as possible. So, right there when you start off this game, that's the first building that you're really going to have access to, and it's going to be the first one you want to start upgrading anyway, which kind of works out. So don't worry about that. So building number 2 that we're going to talk about is going to be the tavern. The tavern is where you pretty much put heroes for a whole week to hang out and de-stress themselves. The tavern has like a bar, gambling, and a brothel that you can do this. Be advised, when you are de-stressing your characters in the gambling hall and the bar, there's a tendency sometimes for them to get lost, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. And it will take stress away from your characters, which we'll talk about more in other videos when we talk about combat, building teams, and stuff like that, going dungeon delving. So the tavern's 3 upgrades are the bar, the gambling, and the brothel. All these really do is they increase the number of slots available for a number of heroes you can put in them. They increase the amount of stress relieved, and they decrease the cost. And that'll kind of be up to what you want to do. You don't have to go too buck wild with upgrading these in the beginning. As long as they're kind of there to de-stress a little bit, you're kind of good to go. We're going to go a little bit out of order here. The building after the tavern that I want to discuss is the Abbey, which we'll get to the sanitarium in a second. We'll come back to it. The Abbey is kind of the same thing as the tavern, except it has like praying, meditation, and like flagellation instead of like gambling, drinking, and like, you know, brothel. And it's the same thing. It relieves stress, and you're going to be putting heroes in there to de-stress them throughout the game. Its 3 upgrades are very, very much like the tavern. They have the cloister, the transept, and the penance hall. They're going to increase the amount of stress relieved, eventually open up more slots so more heroes can use it at once, and reduce the cost. I personally like to use the Abbey a little bit more, mainly because it has less chance of people getting lost or freaking out with random events. So I like to use the cloister and the transept a whole lot for stress relief. It's worked out very well for me, but you can use both, so keep those 2 in mind. Now going back to building number 3, because I kind of skipped it for a second there, we're going to go to the sanitarium. Now, the sanitarium is very, very important in this game. It's another thing that you're going to want to upgrade early on. It is used to treat pretty much negative quirks, and it is also used to treat diseases, which diseases you will gain from fighting certain creatures or interacting with certain things in dungeons, and they can be... Some of them are really not that big a deal, and some of them can be super crippling to your combat experience. So you have to kind of like keep track of your heroes and look. Now, the negative quirks, they may not seem like a big deal in the beginning, but the problem is with quirks is they grow to be better or worse ones. So after a few weeks, you'll see a skull appear next to one of them, and the effects will get worse. So if you have somebody that has like is a melee character and has a negative quirk that makes them have a -5 to their accuracy with melee attacks, it may not be that big a deal to you, but eventually that's going to grow into a bigger negative quirk and be a -10. That can cripple a character. So you have the treatment ward, which is going to be able to take away negative quirks, and the medical ward, which takes away diseases, which have a lot of the same types of horrific negative effects that quirks do, except they're somewhat easier to remove with a plague doctor, which we'll explain later on in the dungeoneering and strategies. You can upgrade the treatment library, the medical devices, and the patient cells. I highly suggest opening up as many cells as you can for the treatment ward early on, and try and remove quirks from characters, because it's going to make more powerful characters in the long run, so you may as well start early, and it won't cost as much. So keep that in mind, and we'll talk about quirks and diseases, like I said, when I do a video on actual characters and their stats and building teams and all that stuff. But for now, we're just talking about the building itself, so you know what the hell it does. So keep that in mind. That's going to be like the second most important starting building for you as far as upgrading things goes, okay? So moving right along, we are going to go to the guild. Now, the guild is... We could say it's an important building. It is, but it's not going to be really important until later on. It's kind of a two-parter, and this is why. So the guild's main function is, when you have a character brought into it, they have all the skills that you can unlock. Each character has 7 skills. You're not going to start with all of them able to be used. This isn't level dependent. You can literally unlock every character's skills at 0 level just by paying for them to unlock them. And then you'll notice that you can upgrade their level. So the upgrades for the guild are the Instructor Mastery, the Training, and the Training Regimen. All that does is the Instructor Mastery, for each time you upgrade it, unlocks the ability to upgrade your skills to a new level, which makes them do more damage and more cool shit, but there's a thing to that. The Training Regimen is going to make it all, like, cost less. Now, you don't have to worry about that super early on, because you don't need to go through upgrading all of your characters. Like, when they reach level 2, you don't have to immediately upgrade your Instructor Mastery and, like, start upgrading all of their skills to, like, level 2. You don't need to do that in the beginning. It's a huge amount of money to invest, and you're not going to have tons of money. So don't worry about that in the beginning. That's like a mid-game thing. But what you will need it for is to unlock the skills so you can at least use them. So as you start to look at different characters, if they don't have a skill unlock that you really like using, you just pay, I think it's like 800 gold, and it'll unlock that for you, and you're good to go. So after the guild, you're going to eventually unlock the blacksmith. The blacksmith is more of a mid-game building. It'll become available to you somewhat early on, so you might be like, oh my god, let's do this, and it's pretty self-explanatory in itself. The blacksmith allows you to upgrade your weapons and your armor as your characters level up, but you're going to have to go into the blacksmith upgrades and upgrade the weaponsmithing and armor smithing to increase those levels. And then they have the furnace, which decreases the amount you have to pay per rank and all that stuff. But really, you don't have to worry as much about blacksmith stuff until you're starting to get some level 3 and level 4 characters, and you can start upgrading your weapons and armor, because it's going to take a lot of money, and you're going to want to upgrade your skills too. This is why money is going to be a big thing in the later game. In the beginning, you want to focus on getting, like, heirlooms and stuff like that, but we'll go over that in another video. So the blacksmith, pretty self-explanatory. Just don't worry about it in the beginning. It'll just, it'll cause you stress. So another thing that's going to unlock after all of those is the survivalist. The survivalist, I mean, it is a building. It's a tent. It looks pretty rough. It's up on like a hill. It's weird. But what it is going to do is it is going to unlock camping skills for you. Now, when you start this game, you're just going to be playing short dungeons, so you're not going to have any camping skills that can be used with that. But eventually you're going to start unlocking medium and long dungeons, which they're going to give you firewood that you can make camp in the dungeon. When this happens, you get a certain amount of points that you can spend to use these campfire skills. So camping skills are like super good, and they have a lot of benefits, including a lot of stress management. But we'll get into that once again when we go into like dungeon delving. I'll start bringing that up. It only has one type of upgrade, and it's the bonfire, which just reduces like cost to purchase these skills. You're not going to have to worry about it right in the beginning, because it's not going to become unlocked for a little while, but it is a cool thing to jump on, and I will explain all of that in time. So one of the last things is the Nomad Wagon. It pretty much just sells trinkets, which are cool items you can equip on your characters to give them better resistances or more attack damage or more hit points, weird stuff like that. They sound awesome. They're pretty expensive, so you're not going to want to use the Nomad Wagon in the beginning of the game in most circumstances. And it increases its upgrades, basically our wagon size and merchant network. Wagon size is going to increase the number of trinkets that show up each week in the Nomad Wagon, and the merchant network is going to reduce the cost of the trinket purchases. Don't worry about the Nomad Wagon on your first play or even second playthrough. It's not a big deal. Maybe in the late game, if you want to pick up an item or two when you have a lot of money, feel free, but don't like start going into it in the first like 10 weeks of the game and be like, I need this for 5,000 gold pieces. Don't do that. But it's just worth knowing at least what it is, so you're good to go there. Now, I've been talking about it a little bit, and you're going to have pretty much what's called heirlooms. If you've never played this game before, it can be a little bit confusing. It doesn't really explain it very well. You're going to see down next to your gold on the right side and the bottom of the screen, pretty much these 4 symbols. It's going to be a statue of a head. It's going to be a picture in a frame, a scroll, and a shield. These are different type of heirlooms. They are the currency that you're going to use to upgrade all of these buildings. So in the beginning of the game, you want to focus on getting heirlooms a little bit more than you want to focus on getting money. And we'll get into that more when you start going through dungeons and stuff like that in other videos, but just keep in mind that when you are here in the estate, there are a little 2 arrows that are next to the shield icon on the right. You can actually tap on that and bring it up to trade certain types of heirlooms for other ones. So you can kind of mix and match to see what you need to upgrade. If you need a few more of the shield, you might be able to give up some of your picture frame ones to get more of the shield ones, stuff like that. So that's something you'll kind of figure out in time. So those are the overview of all of the buildings in the estate that you're kind of going to be interacting with on like a game level. The only ones that, like I said, there's the Weird Memoirs one where you can look at like cutscenes, and then there's the Graveyard where you can kind of see your characters that have died, which is not super useful and somewhat depressing, so I just don't do it. And you're going to pretty much be interacting with these throughout the game, but like I said, kind of start with the Stagecoach, upgrading that, and then eventually you're going to want to start to upgrade the Sanitarium so you can remove some negative quirks. But like I said, we'll get into that when we go over like characters and their stats. So I hope this helps. I hope this is a good starting point for you to start looking at your town and you know what everything does. And our next video, we are going to jump into looking at the dungeons themselves. There's a whole entire kind of map, and there's different types, so we will figure it out. So thank you guys for hanging out with me, and I will see you on the next one.